What you're about to see is almost heresy. A fat man caught on camera committing treason. Treason for a motoring journalist. At the very least, it's an egregious breach of the code of conduct. So, in this video, heretically enough, I'm going to tell you that perhaps you should leave the car behind at times. And when you do, it's easier to ride than walk. It's actually fun, and you might live longer. So the question for you, dude, is are you up for the Auto Expert Anti-Slob Challenge? I'm John Cadogan from AUTOEXPERT.com.au, and I get new cars cheap, dude. But hey, Australia only. Website. Card. The backstory here. A few months ago, the dudes from St Kilda Cycles reached out to me. It's like sending a message from heaven to the Antichrist, surely. But they said, words to the effect of, would I be interested in looking at these counterintuitively cool anti-kudos fold-up bicycles from Dahon? I said, okay. This report's not sponsored, okay? They sent me the two bikes to evaluate. They were slightly used. There will, however, be a link in the description and a code which will get you a free Luma bike lock on top of their already razor-sharp sale pricing, and they ship nationwide. StKildaCycles.com.au. Dahon has been doing folding bikes for about 40 years now, since 1982, I think, so they'd be pretty good at it by now. My estimation is, yeah, dude, they are. It only takes about 30 seconds to go from folded to fully unfurled, or vice versa. You have to have about, I don't know, 4 or 5 goes at it before it becomes more or less intuitive. You fold the pedals, drop the seat, twist the bars up, drop the stem, and break the bike in half with Jedi mind power. Alternatively, you can just use the hinge that they put there for non-Jedis. There's also a very clever magnetic closure system that stops them unfolding whenever they just feel like it, such as halfway up the stairs to your apartment. These two bikes that I tested use the same basic frame geometry. They both roll on 20-inch wheels, which is the same size as BMX, I think. So they're okay on imperfect surfaces, such as everywhere you're likely to ride. Certainly they're a bit more compliant than a 16-inch wheeled bike. You can see folded versus unfolded here. The black one is just a more entry-level proposition on the component front. More on that in just a sec. They each weigh about as much as a 2-year-old male child, so 12-ish kilos. And that means if you can't carry one up the stairs or lift it onto the parcel shelf, on a train, into or out of a car, etc., it is high time for you to have a good, hard look at yourself in the mirror. The black one is called a hit. It's the more affordable of the pair. It's on sale at St Kilda Cycles for $495. The orange one is a launch D8, the same basic setup, more premium components. It's on sale for $929-ish. There's about $430 in between these two bikes. If you visit St Kilda Cycles on the website, just check out the accessories, because the fenders, the racks, the baskets, stuff like that that you might want, they're all heavily discounted if you pick them up when you buy the bike. The more I looked at these bikes and the more I rode them, and I've got, I don't know, 200 to 300 Ks on each one of them by now, the more they became proper engineering porn to me. They're not toys, they're not junk, quite the opposite. Also, they're a lot of fun. We'll get to that. But first, why am I even doing this? Clearly, this is exactly the kind of report a 60-year-old old fart who valued his reputation would never do. Like, there is such a thing as dignity or graceful aging or something. That's what I heard anyway. There's a public interest answer though. The car is unquestionably the best thing, and also the worst thing, that's ever happened to humanity. The car is impossibly liberating, and it's also killing us. It's liberating because there's never before been a time in human history when deciding to travel 500 Ks tomorrow was this trivial as an undertaking, right? When travelling 50 k's was pretty much effortless. Killing us, that's a big claim too, especially as road death is so statistically rare. Road trauma is tragic, but it's also fairly insignificant, at least in terms of outright risk. It's certainly significant if it happens to a loved one or a colleague, and I'm not here trying to trivialise that, not one bit. But perspective is everything. If you live in a world where the facts matter, we drive about 210 billion kilometres annually in this country. This is more than 30 return trips to Pluto. And it's not even a planet, dude. So why bother? Last year, a mere 1,200 people died from road trauma. And yeah, each one of those was a tragedy. But when you look at the magnitude of driving, it's a small-scale problem. It's one death for every 175 million kilometres driven. And that's all road users, vehicle occupants, pedestrians, cyclists, etc. It's statistically very low. I'd call it a minor problem in a population of 26 million. Our roads are safe. Fear-mongering over it, which authorities routinely do in the name of safety, but really just to raise revenue, is one of the more enduring flavours of regulatory bullshit in this country. The roads are especially safe if you use them with a view to mitigating risk, such as by getting your snout out of your friggin' phone when you cross the road. There's never been a benign transport system, and there's never going to be one, walking down the street or visiting the Titanic. There's always a chance you're not going to come home, right? It's the price of getting out of bed, and hey, even if you stay in bed, it's no guarantee. There will always be some road trauma, but categorising it as a major problem is simply fear-mongering bullshit. The thing that actually kills us, most often by accident in this country, is, can you guess? Have a crack, dude. It's falling. Off ladders, at work, down the stairs, in the bathroom, off the roof, etc. Accidental falls are the number one cause of injury hospitalisation and the number one cause of injury death in this country. 5,300 people die from accidental falls every year. That's more than 4 times the road toll. And yet, there's no dedicated cop squad targeting this substantial killer, no ladder patrol. Go figure. However, if you'd like to be properly terrified of dying today, be terrified of the god of sugar, diabetes. Diabetes killed 17,500 Aussies in 2020, departing, in that case, being literally such sweet sorrow. That's roughly 15 times the road toll. Thanks very much, Coke, Pepsi and Macca's. Also, it's generally preventable, like generally. And yet, if there were a competition, which flavour of death is best at holding the window of opportunity open for the Grim Reaper in Australia? The clear winner is cardiovascular disease. It's the underlying cause of 42,300 deaths down under in 2019. More than twice as good, if that's the right word, as the god of sugar. But diabetes is getting stronger every day, so there's that. Combined, diabetes and sundry problems with vascular plumbing kill about 60,000 Australians every year. That's 50 times more than the road toll. We don't therefore actually need an overzealous highway patrol and all of those revenue-raking cameras. We need a sugar squad and a sedentary persons unit. Maybe even the ladder patrol. The Sweeney for the stairs. Chocolate cops. I'd like to see that. 12 beverage company executives have been arrested following a massive seizure of Coke from school tuck shops across the nation. If the news said that, I'd pay to see it every night. The car is an insidious player in this death-dealing drama of sedentariness. You know, it's a proxy. It's a ticket on the express to Slob City for you. The car facilitates your transition, and I so hate that word, to a completely sedentary, bogan slob if it becomes your choice to identify in this way. And it is certainly a choice. It doesn't just happen. You don't miss one workout and overdo it on the broccoli one Friday night and then wake up Saturday weighing 200 kegs. It just doesn't work that way, dude. There's no law against doing this, of course, but if you've ever wondered why your health insurance premiums are so freaking high, it's absolutely unrelated to the danger of dying in a car crash. 60,000 people. That's a decent old crowd at the footy, isn't it? In fact, it's 20% more than the recent crowd at the State of Origin match in Adelaide. That's the number of graves that will need to be dug for all of the proud sons and daughters of Anzacs, whom diabetes and cardiovascular glitches are going to claim over the next 12 months. Many of these dudes are in the Macca's drive-through right now with their kids, because walking to the so-called restaurant from the car park just seems too much like hard work these days. Obviously, not all of those deaths are preventable. Like, if you're 82 and you suddenly wake up dead one morning following a heart attack, something ultimately had to recall you to the factory, and a case could be argued that your time was up anyway. However, many Australians, some younger than you, are recalled to the factory far too early, and the message here really is, put down that coke, dude, get off your ass and move if you want to live. Exercise is not about aesthetics, not historically and certainly not today. It's always been about life and death. I thought pretty hard about how to fit these foldy bikes into a report on this admittedly intellectually highbrow channel, and this is it, dude. What they represent is a solution of sorts, part of a solution anyway, to get more active, an alternative to driving short distances that makes moving more, if not easy, then at least accessible, more doable. If exercise were easy, it wouldn't be exercise. You have to work, right? It's not meant to be like an hour in the hot tub with the cheerleaders and their mummies. If your local shops are like 3 k's away, as they are in my case, you can get there in about 12 minutes on one of these foldy bikes. It's dead easy. You can fold it up and chuck it in the trolley and grab the ingredients for dinner and be back before the chicken turns into a mad salmonella breeding experiment. If you're worried about that, buy some frozen peas, dude, like as a preservative. Adapt, improvise and overcome, in other words. I can't possibly ride the bike because the chicken, well, that's up there with the dog ate my rat test. If you ride this terribly short distance, like 4 times a week, that's 25 k's, okay, in a week. 1,250 kilometres every year. It adds up, doesn't it? Call it 125 litres of fuel that you didn't buy. That's $250 you're going to save in a year just on the fuel. Imagine if you bypass some tolls or some parking fees in the CBD with the same methodology, right? That's half of the cost of the black bike and much less than the price of admission for a suspected fucking heart attack. It's also roughly 300 kilos of CO2 that you sidestep emitting, and you avoid 400 cold starts on your engine. Cold starts, of course, are the absolute worst operating condition for any engine, during which time maximum wear and tear takes place. It's roughly 100 minutes of decent cardio a week too, which you otherwise probably would not have done. But it's not so hard that you're going to be bedridden tomorrow. It's a pretty low impact form of exercise. You can put this sort of bike in any car too. Kia Picanto, no problem. You can take the kids to, I don't know, soccer training or something, and then you can unpraying mantis your bike and go for a ride for 45 minutes or something. A bike like this is also going to fit right next to your desk at work, no problem, and in the closet of your apartment. Alternatively, it could just live in the boot and come out whenever the mood strikes you, wherever you take the car. And you don't have to wear Lycra. Nobody wants to look at an awful OFIL, old fart in Lycra. It's undignified, and in my view, it should also be a felony. Normal street clothes are just fine on a bike like this. You can even explore your own city and guarantee there are going to be things there which you have never seen, at least not like that. Just for shits and giggles, I parked one day on the lower north shore of Sydney, near where I live. It's free parking, and I rode over the Harbour Bridge which saved me $4 in tolls and Christ knows how much in city parking fees. There's a dedicated cycleway on the west side of the Harbour Bridge, and it's generally underutilised in the middle of the day, despite being one of the best seats in the whole house. I went to Barangaroo, Pyrmont Bridge, I circumnavigated a bunch of wharves. It's a very different way to see the best parts of any city, and you hardly ever have to ride on a road, and when you do, there aren't many cars if you do the planning right. First time I took the black one, I took it 15 k's on the Parramatta Valley Cycleway, which is a brilliant and somewhat underutilised infrastructure program itself that effectively separates you from cars totally. That's where the riding shots in this video were taken. You can take a bike like this on a touring holiday, the big lap of the country or something, and you will see more of the joint you're visiting than just about any other way. It's a different and generally better experience outside of the car. At least it is for short hops. In many ways, using a bike like this is more pleasant than actual exercise. Anyone who does strength training or martial arts will appreciate that the purpose of that kind of training is essentially to suck out your soul and remove your will to live and thereby motivate you to be incrementally less pathetic tomorrow. Repeat. This is not like that. Riding a foldy bike from A to B is up the other end of the exercise spectrum. It's almost not that hateful. So there's an environmental case for doing this, right? Plus you get much needed incidental incremental exercise. You reduce congestion, you reduce wear on your engine. It's kind of fun, even vaguely challenging at times. It's certainly convenient. It won't kill you or make you feel as if death is imminent in the manner of strength training. In fact, you might even live longer. Hashtag fuck you, diabetes. On my first ride of the orange one, I dropped the car off for a service, and normally I would walk to the station. That's like 5 minutes, right? I'd wait for a train, 10 minutes. I'd ride the train for, say, 12 minutes, then I'd walk home. Let's call that 28 minutes. Total of 55 minutes out of your life that you're not going to get back. It's about 10 k's, this trip, if you do it by road. Foldy bike took me home in 40 minutes. Or is that I took myself home on foldy bike, whatever. So I got higher intensity incremental exercise, I saved 15 minutes, and I missed out on the joy of riding the frickin' train. Overall, I was expecting riding these bikes to be okay, like a bit novel, but they're actually a lot better than that. I guess the question is, which one is best for you? We're here in Fat Cave 2.0, which is living proof that everything takes longer than you want it to, and the universe is a work in progress. Sorry about the reverb. I haven't managed to do the audio treatment yet. The lighting setup, at least the hastily repurposed industrial welding bench, which weighs as much as a Corolla and was just so hilarious to move in and get it exactly in the right position. At least it's doing a good job holding up the props today, so that's the main thing. The central overarching thesis of this report is best said in Arnie's voice, and the message would be, move your ass if you want to live. Pretty simple, right? And of course, the car can be a huge impediment between you moving your ass and getting to health and longevity, right? If you let it. But if you decide to make your ass incrementally less corpulent over time by moving it a little bit more, then the question is just which conveyance here would suit you best. And it is a $430-something question because $495 versus $929, okay? And it's not clear cut, at least not to me anyway, because I've really enjoyed riding the black one, which is called a Hit, and I've really enjoyed riding the orange one, which is called a Launch D8. The 8 is for the number of gears. We'll get to that. The Hit was contrived in the pandemic because demand for this kind of thing just went through the roof, and that meant the prices went through the roof as well. So what Dahon did was they got a whole bunch of in-house componentry and they put it on their existing frame geometry, which is fairly brilliant, I'd have to say. They've spent 40 years perfecting foldy bikes and they're pretty good at it. So this is a more affordable component set. This is a more premium component set. Let's talk about the points of commonality. one of the principal objections I can hear people say is, oh, I'd never fit on a bike like that. And I've got to say, bullshit, dude, you'll fit. You will, because the ergonomicists who worked on these frames designed them so that if you're between 4'8" in the old money and 6'5", you're going to fit. That's like 142 centimetres to 195 centimetres in Metricville, right? So yeah, you're going to fit, and you're not too heavy. On the balance of probability, you're not too heavy, even if you're 20 kilos overweight. So let's talk about that for a moment, because this is fascinating, and both of these bikes have this particular feature. See this cable here? It sort of completes the triangle. You know how mountain bikes and road bikes are essentially a truss made of two triangles. So you've got the front triangle and then this back triangle here. Well, this member in the truss is kind of in tension, and its function is to stop the top tube from being a cantilever, in this case, north of the hinge where the bike folds, okay? And completing the truss increases the load carrying capacity of the frame to 130 kilos in the case of the Launch D8, to 137 in the case of the Hit. That's 300 pounds in the old money, okay? So on the balance of probability, if you're less than 300 pounds, you're not going to overload this bike. You can get on it and ride and have a crack, and even if you only manage 2 or 3, maybe 5 minutes on the first day, at least you did something that you didn't do yesterday, and all you've got to do is that over and over and over to get where you'd prefer to be. It's like coming back to life. It's like the opposite of a death of 1,000 cuts. You've got to do the resurrection of 1,000 cuts if you want this to work, right? The other really interesting thing to me in the domain of engineering porn is the tubes themselves, because they are properly pornographic. They use hydroforming, which is quite common in bicycle design, but if you're not familiar with it, when you use an extruded section, like a square hollow section or a round hollow section, the thing about extrusions is it's the same cross section along the entire length. But imagine if you were to get a piece of aluminium tube, put it in a special die that was the shape you wanted it to be in its final form, cap the ends, and then pump it full of hydraulic fluid at high pressure. You could take an extruded section and you could turn it into something that was exactly the shape you needed it to be, and it would not have to have a constant cross section. The cross section could just change over the length. There's plenty of changes here. There's like little cutouts where the front chain ring gets additional clearance, and there's changes in the section of these oval bits of the tube here. There's lots of hydroformed parts in both of these frames, and essentially what it allows the designers to do is optimize the material for the loads that have to be endured at various different points, like optimized for bending moment in the center of a section, and then optimized for welding and joinery at the ends, which is absolutely brilliant. The critical joints that fold up, they're all fail-safed. So they can't essentially come loose in operation because it's a 2-stage unlock. And trust me, you really do want that kind of fail-safing because of the nature of the problem you could have if it wasn't that way, okay? So this hinge here on the stem and this hinge here in the center, which are the two principal folding mechanisms of the bike, they're both fail-safe, so they can't come loose when you ride them, right? 2 things would have to fail for that to happen. The other thing I wanted to talk about as a point of commonality between both of these frames is the welding, because it is exceptional. If you know anything about welding aluminium, you'll know how difficult it is, and in particular TIG welding aluminium. You need specialised equipment because you can't use DC TIG on aluminium. You need to use AC TIG, and it's got to be like surgically clean because the smallest impurities give you the hugest problems. And the more you look at these frames, the more welding you realise there is putting them together. There's no undercuts. It's extremely consistent, but I think a human being did at least some of it, because when you look, there is just that human level of fuzzy logic in the distance between the stack of dimes in some of the welds. They've done a really impressive job, and I can't find a single defect on either of these frames which would concern me in the slightest. I haven't even found a defect that wouldn't concern me. The welding is that good and that consistent. And when you think about the combination of all of those things, the hydroforming, the optimization, the good quality welding, and the materials used, what you get is a bike that weighs about as much as an average 2-year-old male child. It's in the ballpark of 12 kilos in both cases. So, you know, for multi-mode transport, it's just easy to pick up and go, because if you ride along, you get to the station, you've got a couple of minutes till you've got to get to the train, maybe you don't have time to fold it up. You can still get up and down the stairs easy with a bike that's this light. And to have a structure that's in total 12 kilograms and yet capable of holding 137 kilos in this case, 130 in this case, and we're talking about dynamic loads like over bumps and humps and things of that nature, then that is extremely impressive. Budget is such an issue for a lot of people right now. I get that. But if you put budget to one side and we just look at which bike suits you best, the difference is the polish. That's the main difference. In fact, if I had to say there was one huge difference between these two bikes, it would be down here, okay? It would be the gearing. Lay down misère, that's the biggest difference, because with the hit, you get 6 speeds versus 8 on the Launch D8. And not only do you get more speeds, but you get more range. So you get a lower first gear and a higher top gear. And what that means is the Launch D8 will cope with steeper hills a little better, and it'll also allow you to maintain a higher cruising speed on the flat with more optimized kind of effort, okay? So that only makes a difference if you're going to ride a substantial way. You've got to ask yourself, how far are you going to ride? What's the terrain like? And how often are you going to do it? And if the answer is you're only going to ride 3 to 5 Ks, 2 or 3 days a week, maybe 4 days a week, then the hit is a fantastic value proposition. Because let's face it, if you're going to ride 3 Ks and you're going to average, I don't know, about 15 Ks an hour, then we're talking about 12 minutes of riding. So with the more polished proposition for $430 more, you're only going to experience that polish for like 12 minutes. Does it really matter? Does it really matter that you'll be doing 17 Ks an hour on the flat instead of 20? It's that kind of proposition. Whereas if you decide that you are going to turn foldy bike into a principal means of commuting for you and you're going to take it reasonably seriously, then yeah, spend the extra bucks and you will enjoy that polish far more often. But I'd have to say, as value propositions go, on sale for $495, I don't know how they can put a machine as optimized as this and as sophisticated as this together for that price. I don't think too many people are clipping the ticket and making a big fat wedge out of it at $495 a throw. This additional superior hardware on the Launch D8, and is it worth it? We've already covered off the gearing, so if you are actually going to do that longer distance cruising and you want that incrementally higher speed, or you want to attack even steeper hills more aggressively, then great. On the hills though, I would not categorise either of these bicycles as hill climbing champions. They're cruisers. So if you get to a really steep pinch, on the balance of probability, you're just going to hop off and walk it to the top like a normal person. And there's no shame in that, because neither you nor I is purporting to be a starter in the Tour de France anytime soon, right? And there's all these incremental changes. You get a superior saddle, you get better grips, you get a better shifter. And I guess there's a Gestalt theory sort of phenomenon in play there, where the whole of these increments is greater than the sum of them individually kind of thing. It's more polished, right? But two things that are outside that realm of increment are the brakes and the hinge. You get disc brakes, front and rear, and they're mechanical disc brakes. They're operated by a cable as opposed to a hydraulic line, right? And I think that's a smart choice on a bike like this, because I don't see a hydraulic line being as reliable after hundreds of cycles of folding and unfurling of the frame. I see a cable in a sheath being very amenable to that kind of manipulation throughout the life of the bicycle. Brakes being so important, they need to be reliable, so that's lovely. And the final thing is, this is a real case of engineering porn for me, it's the new hinge. There's a next generation hinge in the launch D8, and it's much more compact, much sleeker than the previous generation hinge in the hit. This hinge uses interlocking teeth, which have greater surface area, and it's got that whole mechanical interlocking capability. And that means the bulk of the hinge is reduced. And this is such a salient feature. It's a defining characteristic of a bicycle like this. And if you get off on engineering porn, it's fantastic. I don't know that there's much of a functional difference. It's just a whole lot nicer. And the other big change that this hinge is responsible for is the actual locking mechanism is now underneath the top tube, and it's still fail-safe. It's got the double locking thing, so it can't accidentally come unglued when you're actually riding it, which is fantastic. But the whole thing just takes up a lot less space, and it's so much more elegant that you'd have to give it 13 points out of a possible 10 in the domain of design upgrades. The first time I rode the black Dahon hit was that 15k ride up the river valley that you've seen the shots of. I wanted to shoot it dead cold with no experience and just have a crack at that so that you'd get the unvarnished first view. I'd already ridden the more expensive orange one a little bit, but honestly I didn't find myself wishing I was on the orange one instead, the Launch D8. It's pretty flat going in that river valley, and the hit was actually quite speedy from A to B, despite carrying about 10 kilos of additional camera gear and all of that junk that you need to make such pretty pictures in that bag. Just before I let you go, therefore, I've got these tips for you. There are 10 of them that might ease the transition, there's that word again, from a slob version of you to a much stronger, more functional new you by moving from A to B occasionally on duos wheels, dude, without burning a single hydrocarbon. Number 1, don't get in the way of cars, dude. There's already too many arseholes on both camps, on 2 wheels and 4. As a pragmatic matter, though, being legally entitled to use a particular piece of road is absolutely no consolation if you wake up in hospital unable to feel your legs. Number 2, remember, you're not in the Tour de France. You're not going to be in the Tour de France, so speed is not the number 1 priority. Mitigating risk is. If you get into a you versus car altercation, you are gonna lose. And look at the ambient level of driver competence out there on the roads. Protecting yourself is on you, so be grown up about it. On the flip side of this, if you're the kind of arsehole who thinks cyclists have no rights because they don't pay registration, then please don't breed or drive. Give cyclists a fair go. They are people. It does not cost you anything, including any time. It's also morally just and legally required. Number 3, wear a helmet, dude. Remember the extreme danger posed by accidental falls. So put your brain in a box. How hard is it? Use the helmet when you get up a ladder also. Seriously. Number 4, tyre pressures really matter on a bike. In fact, they'll give you a whole new appreciation for why you need to check them once a fortnight in your car. I always go for the maximum on hard surfaces when I ride a bike because reduced rolling resistance and increased puncture resistance. That pressure is on the sidewall of every tyre, and you just need to pump it up to that, dude. It'll make things a lot easier. Number 5, wear gloves. Not because riding is hard on one's hands, it's not. Because falling off really is. It's quite abrasive down there. Now, I'm kind of partial to mechanics with an X and ironclad, one word. They are both awesome glove brands for this kind of thing. Number 6, backpacks are kind of okay, but a crossbody bag like the one you see me wearing from Crumpler, they're awesome. They're properly awesome for this kind of commuting. You can access your stuff without taking them off, which is super useful if you need your Beretta M9 urgently in Florida, or, I don't know, a drink or something here in Australia where it's nice and peaceful. Number 7, carry a bike pump, a puncture kit, spare tube, and a bike-specific multi-tool with the right Allen keys, usually metric, okay? I always carry also a Leatherman, gaffer tape, basic first aid kit, plus a couple of cable ties, and, of course, some fresh fish nets, because one never knows. It's just how I roll. Number 8, if your bike comes in a box and you are not a total mechanical Jedi with bicycles, get a bike mechanic to sort it all out before you ride it. This is just basic risk management, because you don't want anything to come unglued on that first ride. That'll colour the whole experience, dude. Number 9, don't forget lights if you're even remotely likely to get caught out after sunset. And number 10, if you're going to put your foldy bike in the back of a car, like horizontally, put it down rear wheel up, like derailleur up. That's the better to avoid bending the bracket that the derailleur bolts to. If you do bend that, it will not shift properly, and it'll be rivers of blood and plagues of frogs and Scott Morrison back in the lodge, dude. Nobody wants that. The central overarching thesis here, move your ass, dude. A foldy bike like these Dahons from St Kilda Cycles can really help. Modern life is easy. It's too freaking easy. And therefore, you have to make it harder. That's on you. That's the Bogan anti-slob challenge in a nutshell. I can't afford to lose you, dude. Especially if you're a subscriber. Like, you've watched this whole video all the way to here. #respect. Therefore, I love you, platonically. I'm saying, please don't die prematurely if you're a subscriber. Which you should be, because this channel is so impossibly freaking stimulating and philosophically highbrow. And occasionally, despite YouTube's zealous AI censorship, I even find a way to work in random clips of hotties at the beach.